It's always, a little nerve-wracking when you clap before the presentation. Now we're like, okay, how's it gonna go? Welcome to Mo Money, Mo Mission, which is how you have to say it. And I specifically made the title something fun because I feel like we gotta put the fun back in fundraising. That's right, and we're talking about joy, and it's a gift of the Spirit, and hey, let's make it fun. Otherwise, if you go up to someone and you're like, I hate to ask you, but I gotta put this squeeze on you, or whatever else weird that we say about fundraising language, and someone's like, ew. That's not how we want to engage our relationship. So this is a crash course on fundraising. How many of you have been on the fundraising track with these sessions? You just kind of have hopped around. Fantastic. Well, thank you for supporting us. Thank you for having us here. It's fun to be a part of the conference. I was remarking with John Mills that last year I came to these and I was like, wow, there's a surprising lack of fundraisers. And then I came here and there's like 9 of us rolling deep. So careful, we might, take over from the CFOs. By putting this as a crash course, this is intended to be kind of base level information for those of you who maybe are new to fundraising or have been in fundraising for a while but have never had formal training in it. And so I'm just going to preface that by saying, who am I and what are these letters after names and all the rest? So the CFRE is a professional standard exam. It's a certified fundraising executive. Is that what you call it? And so it's from national accreditation body. You have to work in fundraising for at least 3 years in order to sit for that exam. Its material is for 5 years and up. And then there's one higher than that, which is CFRM, which is Certified Fundraising Master, I believe. And so for that, you have to pass your CFRE 3 times or renew it 3 times, and then you sit for a CFRM. And so there are people who are way better and smarter than me at fundraising. I just fell into it because somebody at my charitable dental clinic, which is where the background I come from, said, hey, would you mind writing this thank you letter to a donor? And there I was sitting at the front desk as a little receptionist and was like, sure, I can do that. And then they said, would you mind calling that donor and thanking them? And I said, sure, I'd love to talk to people. And then they said, would you mind asking that same donor to come to this event and maybe sponsor it? And I was like, sure. And that was the last one, right? Then they were like, you are now a director of development. And I was like, what am I developing? I should also say I'm a recovering English major. So I am trying very hard to keep this brief, but no one has ever accused me of being brief. So I'm gonna do my very best. You're welcome to come talk to me. I unfortunately have a phone call right after this, but I will leave my cards and I wanna talk to you, and I will be late for that phone call because I want to talk to you so bad. So y'all have to help me out and be like, go Elijah, be responsible. And most importantly, I love Jesus. I fell into this because I wanted to serve Jesus in the church. And I thought that meant, and I became a Christian at a military college. And so all my friends that were Christians were pastors. And so I thought, well, if you're serious about your faith, you go get ordained and do that. And I come from a liturgical background. So like being ordained means like collar and like you are now a priest or whatever. And it's the Anglican church, if anyone's familiar. And so I met all those folks, and then what I found, unfortunately, was that there was no outreach really to speak of within a church context, right? And there was a lot of people who had grown up in the church, which is fantastic, but they were kind of ministering unto themselves. And I was like, well, no one has come from a social location that's similar to mine, right? Like, to put it bluntly, there were no young brown kids from like the bad part of town that were a part of my church. And I was like, we should be talking to them. Like, I think Jesus said to do that. And so the final forgiveness is that I'm coming off Rick's talk. So I'm like, yes, we serve the poor. That's why we're here. Because Jesus said he's present in like 3 ways, and one of them was among the poor. So anyways, we're gonna keep talking about that. Most importantly, my wife is way cooler than me. She's an RN, worked in critical care in hospital systems all throughout COVID. She's way cooler than me. And because she's cooler than me, she's taking care of our 3 kids right now. So you can pray for her. Judah is 3, Malachi is 2, Scout is 5 months old. And if you ask me, like, when do you sleep? That's why we had 3 kids. We're like, let's just get this out of the way now. We'll be able to sleep later. I run a business called Anchor and Oak Strategies. When I was sitting as the interim ED of my clinic, I got pitched by a lot of consultants. Nothing wrong with consultants. But when I was pitched ideas by them, I realized that they are experts and they can help me craft a plan, and they will not implement it for me. And that's the problem I had. I could come up with the plan, but I just had no capacity to actually implement it. So I was like, man, if I ever go off and swim the river and become a consultant, I want to be an implementer, not just a strategic thought partner. That's really important, but we need more capacity builders to help clinics and ministries and small nonprofits grow to where they can then adopt that in-house. And so that's what I do now. My friend John David and I are trying to start a community health center in Charleston, South Carolina. What pays the bills is me helping out different nonprofits and ministries and churches all around, which is pretty fun. And so happy to talk about that afterward. Okay, let's begin. How does this statement make you feel? I'm going to read it out loud to you, then I want you to turn to your partner. As a leader, you are responsible for the financial health of your ministry. So even if you have the luxury of a professional director of development, you are responsible for raising money to advance the mission of your organization. Now turn to the person next to you. Immediate emotional reactions. Talk. It'll take about 10 more seconds. All right. Who wants to share just like one word, maybe a phrase? How did it make you feel? Call it out.
True and burdensome.
Burdensome. That's good. What else? What is it? True. It's true though. Yeah, that's why it's burdensome. Okay. What else? Daunting. What did you say? Embarrassed? Did I hear that? Oh, nervous. Okay. Oh, yeah. Kind of nerve-wracking because of a changing climate. It's good. Awesome. This is all true. I have some required reading right here. There's a book called Imagining Abundance by Carrie Robinson. You can take a picture of it. I'm going to leave these books up here. And then, I'm going to take them with me. These are my personal ones, but they're up here for you to take a picture of afterwards. And then The Spirituality of Fundraising by Henry Nouwen. I was commenting earlier that the Roman Catholics have all the good material on fundraising. So y'all just got to get with it. We need a little bit more out here in the Protestant church. So these are fantastic resources about not just practical tools of how to fundraise, but about the theology and mindset around fundraising. What we want to shift is from daunting, nervous, maybe embarrassing is actually how someone might feel, right? We want to be able to say with Henry Nouwen that fundraising is ministry. It is a ministry of invitation. You are invited to be very close to someone's deepest passions and fears. And as a pastor, you are connecting them to Jesus. So today, this is the 7 things we're going to talk about. Again, we're going to go quick through it. Each one of these could have been a talk. I think next year, one of them will be a talk, and I'll just kind of deep dive it for the next 7 years. So John, you're stuck with me. So let's begin. with some definitions because I'm an English major. When I talk about development, I describe that as cultivating resources for an expressed purpose. Development is not fundraising. Development is cultivating resources. Why do we go broad? Because people have lots of resources. We've heard maybe the adage time, talent, and treasure, which, by the way, a pet peeve of mine is when pastors get on at the podium and they're like, please give of your time, talent, or treasure. And I'm like, did Jesus ask for one of those things? He wants all of you. Fundraising is asking for money to support worthy projects and ministries. Emphasis on worthy. So if I'm a director of development, if that's my job title, then what I'm saying is, well, part of my job is to cultivate this, the resources at my organization to make it worthy of investment. So as much as I'm developing the financial resources of the organization, it may also have a role in developing the programs that I'm offering, or the marketing and communications of those programs. A fundraiser is an event, a campaign, or another mechanism through which you bring in charitable gifts. It's not a person. So I don't really like that we call ourselves fundraisers. I know that's the shorthand, but like a fundraiser is a thing, right? But a person is a development professional. It's a philanthropy professional. I use different titles for that. That's why I like director of development the most. Advancement. So if anyone has ever worked at a school, or maybe university, you saw like the advancement department. I don't know why that emerged as its own thing, but I like it because advancement means moving the mission of the organization forward. So I would actually have it that if you don't want your director of development developing programs, you should call them director of advancement and say, hey, your role is to advance the mission of the organization forward. Institutional giving is just the one other thing I want to say because I'm not going to touch on it too much. Institutional giving is gifts made by organizations, usually by means of a grant application for a charitable purpose, which is different than business-to-business sales, which if you went to our panel discussion, we talked a little bit about that. Institutional giving means I'm usually applying through a foundation for a charitable purpose. And people have whole degrees in that, or certifications at least. Okay, so what are we asking for? I think it's very important we talk about language, the way that we use it. This is my English major background. But I mentioned earlier kind of in jest that we have all these different shorthands for asking for money. I think because we don't have a robust theology of money in our relationship to it. So I put Matthew 6:21 up there where Jesus says, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. This is about storing up your treasures in heaven. This morning in my morning devotional, I was reading Mark 7:18 through 23 is where Jesus is commenting on the Pharisees who are asking, why don't your disciples wash their hands before they eat, which is a tradition and a ritual. And then he goes on for a long time, chewing them out, which is Jesus is prone to do, correcting them, rebuking them. Then he turns to his disciples and is like, you didn't understand what I said either, did you? And they're like, no, of course not. Please help. And Jesus says, after a long way of explaining what comes out from a man, let me just read it. Do you not see that whatever goes into a person from outside cannot defile him since it enters not his heart? And then Mark has a little comment because he's writing from Peter who had that vision about clean animals, right? So Mark says, and this is where he declared all foods clean. Then he goes back. Jesus continues, all these evil things, and he has a long list, come from within a man, and they defile a person. So it's about our heart. So what does money have to do with this? Money is how we throw up defenses around the things that we hold dear to us. And just like Rick's talk from earlier, which I won't go into, it's very fun. Money is how we insulate ourselves both from externally responding to the need and internally responding to the call for Jesus. Remember I said, I think in Matthew 25, Jesus is making abundantly clear the hands and feet of Jesus are not us. As much as we like to call ourselves the hands and feet of Jesus serving the poor, even more than that, the hands and feet of Jesus are the ones that are opening their hands in need. That's what Jesus says in Matthew 25. Whatever you've done to the least of these, you've done unto me. He identifies himself with those in need. And how much more are those in need that are insulating themselves from their need for God? That's what fundraising is about. It's about building a relationship built on trust where someone could lower their defenses and be invited to raise their affections towards Jesus through their financial giving. Because follow the money, that's where their heart is, right? Or as Matthew put it, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. So let's reframe it. I put some things on the board. Instead of just saying, I don't like asking for money, maybe you can start saying this. And these are some affirmation things. And if you're really into that, you can say it in front of a mirror. I read some Harvard thing where like you stand in a closet and go a power pose and that helps you. And if that helps you, praise God. Say, I get to invite people into God's calling every day. It's fun. Instead of someone saying, you got to put the squeeze on that person, right? Bring your checkbook. You can ask someone in real life, hey, where do you find meaning? Where do you get excited? What are you passionate about? Instead of saying, they have more money than they know what to do with, you can say, man, she's a great potential partner. You see how the language changes? And finally, my favorite is whatever we've internalized in our culture to say fundraising is a distraction from our mission, we have to say fundraising is ministry, right? Landscape shifting, you guys know this, you feel it every day. If 19% of your revenue is coming from a single source of grant funding, it's a high risk to your organization. I said earlier, as a leader, you are responsible for the financial health of your organization. That's because leader is pretty broad. The Army taught me everyone's a leader. But board members are fiduciarily responsible for the financial health of their organization, not just the executive director, certainly not just the founder, and certainly not the director of development, right? As leaders, we are all responsible for this. But mostly what these stats show is that diversification isn't optional. It's necessary for the long-term sustainability of your organization. Even if you're not part of the federal grant funding freeze and you didn't experience that or aren't worried about that, if you are a free and charitable clinic maybe that has a single source of grant funding and you're super excited about it and you apply and you launch a new program and you're like, how are we going to sustain this after 2 years when the grant funding goes away? This is diversification. That's why it's important, right? So we're going to talk about the middle three of these things. I just want to briefly say, if you're building out a strategy for revenue, then here are some buckets. There are plenty more. This is how I like to divide some of them. The one that's not on here is planned giving that we talked about last time. That's because I'm not good at it. So I don't really do much of it. And it's also really hard, right? Meaning really hard to build those relationships over time. And I'm 27 years old. I don't know a lot of people in that age, but plenty of people do. So institutional and grant funding is incredibly important. Your annual fund, I describe as your individual giving. So it's that broad base of smaller donors. Some people call this like your direct mail campaign. I don't call it that because I put lots of things in it. A campaign is a project. Your fund is like a source of revenue, right? Major gifts, described as the top 20% of your donors. More on that later. Recurring gifts are those monthly givers. That's the backbone of sustainable revenue. We're going to talk about that. And then earned revenue, which is incredibly important. That's how you fee for service, right? You bill things and you bill insurance. That's all earned revenue as related to your mission. If it's not related to your mission, it's other business income. And go talk to your accountant about that. Okay, some more stats. Did you know that $557 billion were given charitably in the US last year? That's amazing. So when people say the money is out there, it is absolutely out there. Did you also know that $50 trillion sits in the US stock market right now? So if we're fighting the world's toughest problems at, what is that, less than 1% of the investment that people are giving into the stock market, which is essentially Casino Royale, right? This is a huge problem that we're facing. This is why I think fundraising is a team sport. It can't just be one person. All of us together as a CCHF community need to be helping each other out on this. That's why I'm here. But the most important thing for me is this middle. 64% of charitable gifts come from individual donors, which is more than all the other sources combined. More than grant funding, individual donors. So that's why individual relationships are important. Okay, we're in section 3 already. Fantastic. Take a picture. I'm gonna post these slides. This is how I think about the donor cycle. That's a technical term. I divide the donor cycle. Who's like systems minded, by the way, in the room? Raise your hand. Cool. You're gonna love this. This is like project management professional kind of stuff right here. Praise God. First phase of relationship management is cultivation. Second phase is solicitation. Third phase is stewardship. Within each of these phases, we have a stage. What stage 0 is, that's not on this slide, is prospecting or a new lead, if you've ever been in sales before, right? That is, in my opinion, best served by someone who's not your director of development, especially if you're a small team. Your prospecting for new donors will take, there's a lot of stats, but one of them that's important to me is that prospecting for new donors costs $1.25 for every dollar that you raise. So it costs money to get new donors. Why? Because you need to go out to Chamber of Commerce meetings, you need to take people out to dinner, you need all these things before someone ever makes a gift, right? That's important, but that's a great way for your board to be involved. Feed the funnel. Bring me warm leads, not just, hey, did you know that Jeff Bezos gives a lot of money away? Did you hear that Melinda French Gates is doing all this stuff? No, that's right. My response to that is usually, that's amazing. If you call them, will they pick up? To which they usually say, I don't have their number. And they're like, oh, that's great, it's not a lead then. Our kids go to school together. That's fantastic. If you call them, will they pick up? That's my qualification. And then we put it into discovery. I'm gonna go into all this. Discover, inform, engage moves into solicitation, where you ask them and then they discern, and together you discern whether or not this is a good partnership. Once they discern and they say yes, then you move into stewardship. You thank them in a timely way. We report in a quantitative way the impact that their investment made, and then we invite them to invite others to our mission, where it loops back into cultivation. That's the donor cycle. Okay. I also want to define stewardship as we get to that point. So first, let's just talk about cultivation. What I literally do, and I'll show you some examples, is I put people in these stages. When I'm tracking this in my relationship manager, which is, it can be a Google Sheet, it can be some index cards if you're old school, but we are tracking what stage everyone's at. So I know what the next thing to do is. Here are some questions I can ask. I want to discover why they're passionate about this mission, or if they're passionate about this mission. And I'm looking for 3 things. I'm looking for affinity, capacity, and inclination. We're going to go in the next slide and I'll show you more about what that means. When you're listening out for what does that donor care about, which means what? We're asking questions, not just telling them all about my thing. That time will come. I also want to emphasize that these are not just, they don't have to be different meetings. This can happen all in one meeting, but this is where your intuition and your gut is going to help tell you, is this person, would that be weird if I asked this person, right? And just know yourself. If you're someone who is naturally shy, you're probably going to want to continue to press a little further than you feel comfortable, because your natural governor is going to say, like, I don't want to ask this person to begin with, so I'm going to procrastinate it. But if you're someone who's like, I'm an oversharer and I love it when other people overshare, then maybe slow down a little bit. Build that trust first. What if someone in the discovery phase says, well, I care so much about this because my mother actually just recently passed. And you say, oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. When did they pass? And they say, yesterday. What do? I stop. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry to hear that. Thank you for taking this meeting do you need time? Can we pray together? I stop because I want to honor the image of God in the person in front of me. And that means slowing down. The ask can wait. Then we inform them. Go ahead.
Take a little deeper there.
Mhm.
If you're asking what they're passionate about, and it has nothing to do with what you're doing, what is your response?
It is usually, how did you find out about this organization? So I try to find the connecting piece. And what I'm trying to do there is say, well, what are you passionate about? And they're like, surfing, dogs. Great. Surfing dogs, that's awesome. That's fantastic. How did you find out about this organization then? Oh, well, and then they might tell me a more personal story. Or I heard about it from this friend, okay? And what I'm gonna do, and I'll show you, is put that on a Likert scale. Look, how do you pronounce that? 1 to 5. That person might have an affinity of 1, as I found out, right? But it took the discovery to find that out. Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm.
Are these people who've given $20 to the organization sometimes in the last 3 years? Are these people, like, I think that for me is sort of
Yes. I'm going to say the famous, it depends. What I would say is I try very hard to make sure I have this conversation or someone on my team, if you have a larger team, has this kind of discovery call with every single donor. Because that makes a personal touch point. If this is the only personal touch point you have with a donor the entire year, it's worthwhile. So that on top of, so that's active donors if they've given once. But then also, this is the type of conversation that you're gonna have when you follow up from events. So if someone just came to an event, but they've never donated before, this is why. Anyone that your board members introduce you to, make that warm lead. This is the type of conversation I'm having. This is the entry point, it's discovery. That's a great question. That's not always possible because you might have 10,000 people on your contact list, and I hope you have more than one person managing that portfolio. The second step will be informing them of your need. So we want to share our mission. This is where stories are impactful. This is where an event strategy can be helpful as saying, wow, I want to inform them of the need, but the best way to do that is to get 50 people over, a roundtable discussion. We're going to do it all at once instead of spending a lot of time on individual levels, right? We want to connect their passion to the work. So we just found that out in discovery. So I'm going to tailor the ask. If someone could care less about, the expansion into a rural county, but they care a lot about mental health and behavioral health, then I want to tailor that to this. Hey, did you know this is an upcoming project that we have? Once we've shared the need and we have not formally asked them yet, we've just shared, hey, this is what's coming up. I wanted to share this exciting thing with you. Then we engage them. Maybe we ask them, oh, you're a nurse, would love for you to come and volunteer one day. You don't have to do that. But if an option presents itself, let's do it. Maybe they're a prayer partner. Oh, let's get you, we're trying to find someone to lead our prayer team right now. Would you help with that? Build that relationship before you ask. This is what I was referring to before. Affinity is something you have little control over. This is where like a mission trip can change affinity. This is where a tour can change affinity. This is a meaningful, significant, impactful time in someone's life can change the affinity towards something. So one conversation probably can't do that. But what the conversation can do is the inclination. So someone could be really passionate about community healthcare and access to healthcare. But why would they give to, Lawndale and not Church Health? This is where inclination comes in. How are they inclined to give towards your organization? As a director of development, that's your job. Let's cultivate the inclination as much as we can, right? And then capacity. This is what you have no control over, right? This is someone's capacity to give. What you do have control over is finding that out in some way. So If you are an engineer or you come from like a STEM background, which many of you clinicians do, then I do like a 3D model of this sometimes. What I'm looking for is someone who's segmented out in these different quadrants. So if someone says, gives me indication 555, oh my gosh, that's a capital campaign. This person's a legacy gift. They are all in. If somebody's, maybe moderate affinity, moderate inclination, high capacity, okay, I know my next step. I need to be cultivating them to give towards this organization. What are some personal, impactful moments I can invite them to in the life of my organization to where they're inclined to give towards me, right? If somebody's high affinity, no inclination, they just found out about us, high capacity, great. That's a major gift prospect. Let's start cultivating that. Another practical tool I want to give is on a Google Sheet, that's what I do. I map it out. And this is really helpful if you have board members who are like, you need to talk to this person. And you can just run them through this. Oh, on a scale of 1 to 5, what would you say their giving capacity is? It's a 2. Okay. What's their alignment with this mission? What's their level of participation in our organization right now? And you come up with an 11. And you're like, maybe not urgent. Or you come up with a 7 and you're like, yeah, this isn't a major gift prospect right now. This helps you kind of rank them in a subjective, albeit helpful way. And then finally, donor journeys. So I just took some screenshots, please forgive the stretch. But again, this is really helpful in your CRMs. Good CRMs will do this for you. So for all of you who are saying, should I invest in a CRM? Can it do this?
What's a CRM?
It's a client or a customer relationship manager. So Razor's Edge, Bloomerang, there's a couple of others, Donor Perfect, Give Butter, there's a million others actually. Many of them are not worth the money because a Google Sheet can do this. You set up your tabs and then you link. Okay, I now have a plan for this donor. Right now they're in the cultivation stage. Who's my connector? Well, the relationship connection is my executive director. They know this donor. That's my in. I want to ask them by January 15th of this year for that much money. That might be blank because you don't know yet until you go through discovery. But you've built all this out. The milestone is that July lunch. That's my stewardship moment, right? The likelihood of them giving, it's about an A. Feel confident about that. Again, that might be blank to begin with. You don't know. Detailed steps links you to a different sheet where you're putting all their information in. What's the history of this person with the organization? What's their vision for their participation in your organization? Have you asked them? And then the steps towards asking, you plan it out, you give it a date. For all you systems-minded people, that's very helpful, I have found. For all you people who are saying that doesn't feel organic and true to relationships, I have found that it actually helps those people who are wired that way, like myself, from forgetting about stewardship opportunities. So what happens is you care so much about lots of people that I have 100 unread texts because I can't give more right now. This actually helps. And then if you have a director of development and you're the executive director, your director of development is keeping track of this and they're just nudging you. Hey, you need to reach out to Susie. That came up. And if you are the sole person, then you can set up some calendar reminders. This is where you can use AI to nudge you. Good CRMs that are integrated with AI nudge you automatically. The bad ones that have just had AI slapped on top don't do things like that. It's just a search feature and they call it AI. We moved on from cultivation. This person's ready to give. Now we're in solicitation mode. What am I soliciting for? I am soliciting where their gifts meet the needs of my organization. That does not have to be financial. So I call this a relationship management tool. This process works if you're going to invite someone to church. What's the solicitation? Invitation to church. This process works if you're going to invite someone to meet Jesus for the first time. What's the solicitation? I want to give my life to Jesus. Do you want to give your life to Jesus? This works if you're going to propose to someone. What's the solicitation? Will you spend the rest of your life with me? So when we ask for money, we're offering them the chance to invest in the work of God and the kingdom of God, is what Henry Nouwen says. So don't feel bad about asking. It's an invitation. And what does Jesus say if they say no? Wipe the dust from your feet, move on. And don't just forget about that person. They need more time. That's all. Or they might need a different ask. So you want to ask them, be specific. Here's some tools. Stop talking. That's been a refrain at all of these fundraising talks. Stop talking, leave it. Let them respond. I'll tell you a personal story. I once asked someone for $100,000. It was the most money I'd ever asked for, ever. And I was very uncomfortable with it. And it came out because I said, well, if you have any more questions, like if you want to see our 990, if you want to come and tour, if you want to do all this stuff. And the person responded, oh yeah, I would like to see those financials. What did I do? I suggested an out. So you just don't ask their questions for them, right? Because really what ended up happening with that donor was they needed to talk to their wife first, and they were just trying to buy time, and they didn't want to necessarily say that and make their wife uncomfortable, who was also there, right? Also, try and discover in the discovery phase who makes financial decisions like this, who needs to be involved in financial decisions like this, and you need to invite all of them to the same table. I'll tell you another personal story. My board was really pressuring me to ask someone in their 90s for a significant gift. And I met with this lovely woman who had the capacity for sure and had the affinity for sure. And I did not feel comfortable asking for a gift. I felt like it would, I did not feel like she had the mental awareness at the moment to make that decision. In fact, the more I found out, there was another family member who was in charge of the finances. It was her grandson was in charge of her finances. So who did I need to involve in that ask? Her grandson and also the rest of her family, right? Because this was a generational wealth kind of situation. So I just brought that up to the board and I said, I cannot in good faith ask this person right now. I need to involve the rest of their family first. Which is disappointing to them, but I wasn't going to compromise that. Then you discern, give them time. This can be a waiting stage, and we need to be comfortable with it. Is there a different way to participate? Another great story might be, instead of asking for a hospital partner for $2 million, and they're not going to cut you a check, can you say, actually, can you do all of these things in in-kind donations that adds up to a value of $2 million? We need new equipment. We need to be enrolled on Epic. We need to, do all this stuff. In hospitals, especially in businesses in general, more likely to do that kind of thing. I had a ServPro owner tell me, we pay like 2% or something to the ServPro Foundation. I'm not giving any more charitable gifts, but I will send my guys. So if you need anything, we'll just do it for free. I'll just send guys. So they're just gonna be sitting around if we don't have a job anyways. Great. But that's the ask, not money. Now we've moved into stewardship mode. Stewardship, we want to thank them within 48 hours. That can be a handwritten note, personal phone call. You can automate that. Like a gift receipt needs to be sent automatically. That's kind of standard. But I want to thank them more personally. Then at some point I report. How many of you do an annual impact report? Amazing. How many of you it's digital? Okay. How many of you it's printed? Great. What I like to do if we print them especially is I call major donors and say, hey, our annual impact report just came out. I want to sit down with you and go over some of that. And I just walk through it in person with them, which is an exciting time. It's also an excuse to talk to them. The worst thing I feel personally is when I have nothing to ask a donor for it. I just need to call them and it's on the list and I'm like, So the annual report is a great way to do that. It also helps you get rid of those things. Good grief. We order like 550 people want them. And then you invite them and ask them to invite their friends. Okay, we're gonna keep on rolling for the sake of time. I'm not gonna talk too much about this. You can just take a picture. Again, I have the slides, but when you are thinking especially about, I'm speaking to executive directors and founders and people who lead a director of development or a director of development who is leading a team or thinking about leading themselves. How do I do a good job? more than just how much money did I raise? Did we reach our goals? Think about these things. These are some key performance indicators. I want to especially point out our donor retention rate. Again, it costs $1.25 for every dollar of new prospective money that you raise. After that, it's great because it costs about 25 cents to steward a donor over time for every dollar that you raise. Then you can do some cost-based accounting for all you MBA people out there. And then you can define it by, okay, for all of you who would say, we don't want to do a gala anymore, but my board keeps forcing me. Then you can say, great, let's count up all the labor costs. Let's count up all the time spent against what they could have been doing elsewhere in revenue generating items. So you have that, opportunity cost in that. You count up all the budget of the event, and you say, how much money did we raise? Okay. I'm going to talk about event strategy. That's not the end all be all if you're in the red on that. But it does help you give a number and say, hey, for every dollar that we raised, we spent $2.50 for this event. Just point that out. And that is usually a convincing argument to stop doing it. Okay, we've heard of the Pareto principle, 80-20 rule. So if I was to ask you what's a major donor cutoff in your organization and you fire back $10,000 and I say, great, does your data support that? Go to your CRM, find what the top 20% of your donors are giving. That's a major gift. Move on. Okay, back to my systems people. When you're building out your fundraising strategy and you think, okay, cultivate, solicit, steward, got it. But who am I cultivating? What am I doing? And why am I doing it? And to what end are these funds being raised? This is how I like to group my things. The goal is from the strategic plan. Okay. At my level, I'll have an initiative. So one of my development initiatives might be launching a recurring gifts program. Got it. Why am I launching a recurring gifts program? Because one of our goals is a sustainable source of revenue. Got it. My answer to that is recurring gifts. Then you move on to objectives. Okay, in order to do that, one objective is by mid-May, we need to have the first 10 people enrolled in that. By December, we want 50 people giving $50 or more a month. Got it. What's a project in order to accomplish those objectives? What I like to do on this is to say, let's kill two birds with one stone here. What are my other objectives and initiatives, and how can a single project accomplish multiple things at once, especially in a small shop? If you are a big team, you can assign a project manager to lead that. And then you have tasks that you do on your projects. And these are your day-to-day activities, and you cross them off, and you accomplish your entire project, and then you move on to the next project. And that's how I build out an annual strategy. I literally write this all out, and I present it based off of our strategic plan every year. It also makes reporting easy. How close are we to accomplishing our objectives? Are we on track or are we not? Events. I just have gotten bold and start telling people, I don't do events if the primary goal is solicitation. We're back to that framework of donor journey. I don't do events if the primary goal is solicitation. A secondary goal can be solicitation, but the primary goal needs to either be, is this a cultivation event or a stewardship event? A cultivation of donors or a stewardship of donors. Why? Because I got really sad every time someone said, yeah, but was it worth it? And I just worked so hard, My poor team worked so hard. And we raised, $45,000 and it was great. And yeah, but, was it worth it? Yeah, but it also helped me and check myself and say, well, to make it worth it, I need to follow up with all my new attendees because this was a cultivation meeting. Or if it's a stewardship meeting, I need to maybe make an ask that's relevant to people who haven't given yet this year. Yes, ma'am.
I really
I think so. But I think then your success metrics get a little, can get a little confusing. You have to pick what the success metric is. And so it might be for my major donors, I'm going to steward them by inviting them to do a mentorship program. But the cultivation aspect of this is I'm bringing in all these young professionals in my community. And so my current donors get more engaged in the life of the mission. They feel fulfilled. It's a stewardship opportunity. Cultivation opportunity is the new young professionals that get exposed to my mission. I'm not going to ask anyone for money. But then I have to place an importance. What's more important, the amount of people, new young professionals that show up to this event, or the buy-in for my current donors? Does that make sense? And that's when I would bucket it. Yes, ma'am.
I tackle like a leader gala, wine every year, and then they're upping the price.
Got it. And I would ask who makes a decision at my organization on whether or not we would do it. If it's me, then I would just say, hey, we're not doing it again this year. We're going to rethink what this looks like. Usually it's not just cut it cold turkey. It's, hey, instead of this, we're going to break this into 2 smaller events throughout the year, or we're going to start a series that has the same theme as what our gala would have been, or something like that. If it's a board member or someone else that really likes this thing, I would ask them, if you want this to continue, then you will have to help us sponsor this event. Yeah.
High cost, high work,
Mm-hmm.
and not a lot of skill. And this person said their organization brings in $200,000 based on their income. But I think they have a lot of corporate sponsors who really underwork it. So it's a whole different.
And I would just say, for a couple of things to that. My response, this is cheeky, but I would say, and I know we're low on time, so I want to leave time for questions too. Although we're doing it throughout, I guess. I'll just keep going. Would those gifts come in without my event? That will help me determine the importance of the event. Secondly, is it wise to have an event that raises X percentage of my budget? Because what if there's a global pandemic and we can't do in-person events anymore, for example? So I would ask those questions before just cutting it, or before continuing it. I know some people that it's a Christian ministry, operates a school in Honduras and in churches all throughout Latin America. Fantastic, and they raise $400,000 every year on a single annual event. But the way they have done this is that event is a stewardship event, and they ask for money all throughout the year. And so it sounds like they've raised $400,000 at this event, but they've raised it from major gifts all throughout the year. So really it's a major gifts campaign that has a thank you stewardship event that looks like a gala. It's a banquet, right? So it's a little different way of just asking that evening. It's just hey, look what we did this year, right? Okay, fundraising is a team sport, and I just want to hammer this in. It takes all of us. So these are just some examples of the responsibilities of each of our members on a team. So the director of development, I like to think of as the quarterback. They are heavily responsible for the performance on this field. Bear with me, I did not play football. So this is about to, may or may not land. But your executive director is more like a coach. Not exactly, but they're a partner. Maybe another way to think about it is they're the blind side left tackle or something, right? They're who kind of protects the the fundraising strategy by keeping things going on the field. Your board opens doors for you. This is a great thing. So if a board member ever asks you, I don't know what to do, how do I help? You can say, you can give me clear strategy so I can develop the right initiatives to help us reach our goals. That's a number one thing. Number two is you can introduce me to people who have the alignment with our mission and the capacity to give. Because your job is what? Inclination. But their job is to warm prospect, right? Qualified lead. Up here, I put closes major gifts. That was mostly a reminder for me to say, often a way to split this is that your director of development can just handle the other 80%. But once you get to the top 20% of donors, that's a manageable portfolio, especially in a small shop, for your executive director to sort of be that chief storyteller and really steward those donors. Also helps with access. If someone's giving at a high level, one way to steward that is to provide closer access to top leadership. So give your executive director, hey, Susie, John, and Michael are all your people. Please, steward those relationships well. If you need help, I'm here. I'm gonna give you nudges along the way. But they're the person that kind of makes the ask, if that makes sense. Your program staff is an underutilized resource, especially if you're doing grant funding. I'm just gonna say that. Your program staff should really be handling grants because we can just write it, right? But the person that needs to be doing the reports, I'm just gonna ask your program staff anyways, hey, what did we do? And then I'm gonna waste their time if they don't think their job is also being part of our fundraising team, right? And then finally, your volunteers. How many of you would feel uncomfortable about asking your volunteer for money? Okay, liars. All the research would say they have high inclination. They're already invested in your organization and high affinity. So the question is capacity, and that just means I tailor my ask to a reasonable amount. Hey, would you consider giving $20 a month? Hey, would you consider sponsoring this program to continue? Your volunteers are great. I already mentioned this. Will they answer your phone call? This is shout out to John Mills, who gave me the 3 relationships exercise for boards. Just ask them in your meeting, can you now pull out your phone and send me a group text with one other person who will answer your phone call and have the capacity to make a meaningful gift? Do it in a board meeting, hold them hostage. Or, give them that homework. I don't think that works because everyone forgets after the board meeting. Hold them hostage. When we went over this between your ED and your director of development, I will send out these slides, I promise. The last thing I just want to touch on, because we're running out of time, is that for those of you who are doing campaigns, so if you're actively considering a capital campaign, if you're doing a major gift campaign of any sort, capital would mean like we are building something, right? Usually is what that refers to. But a major gifts campaign is just, hey, we are trying to raise big ticket money, right? Like $100,000 types of gifts, or maybe it's $10,000 and up kind of gifts. These usually take a long time. When I say 3 to 5 year pledge commitments, I want you to kind of think through that and think through who else in your city is thinking about a capital campaign and say, okay, do my donors also give to them? And everyone's like, no, my donors are mine. They give to everyone. So if they have a commitment, an outstanding pledge at a different organization, maybe their church, and that time lab is going to overlap, that needs to be a consideration in your capital campaigns. And that means being transparent and honest and building those partnerships before you begin your capital campaign with the other places that your donors live, work, and play, because that's what they might be giving to. The book says a feasibility study is key here. I think that's important, but for those of you who are starting a new clinic, you may not have anyone to think about the feasibility with. So really the beginning is building relationships and building initial donor contacts and growing the organization's infrastructure in place to where you then can talk to people. And then you do a feasibility study, which just means you interview people and tell them, hey, we're kind of thinking this. What do you think? And that's basically, they give you feedback and tell you, how much money they might support, maybe something theoretically like this. And then you go back to your internal team and say, I think we can raise X amount of money based off the people that we talk to in our current donor list. So don't be mad at your consultants for looking at your donor list and not looking at an external donor list. The reason they're looking at yours is because of inclination. You need a steering committee. Don't give out the numbers until you raise 50 to 70% of it, because then you're getting a bunch of people that could give you $10,000, give you $5. So don't do that yet. Okay, this works. I already said, ask out, propose to your fiancés with this same one. Here's a review, and I'm almost close to time. But what I want to leave with is just a quick review. If this was overwhelming, because it was a fire hose, so I want you to know that you can always talk to me or any of the other CCHF members here. There are people who are way better at fundraising than I am, who have been doing this for a long time, and they will give you way more in-depth knowledge on each of these steps. But if you leave with anything, I just want you to remember, fundraising is a team sport. You're inviting people to meet Jesus through their finances. And cultivate, solicit, steward, repeat. Okay? Come talk to me afterwards. I'm happy to help. I do this for a living. Thank you.